Good afternoon, everyone. This is my Panasonic Boombox from the 90s that I've modified, if you've seen previous videos, to use, well, first to make this battery box cover, but also to use a lithium battery pack and a power supply to drive it. That is working fine, but since this is sort of the test bed for modifications, sorry for that loud noise, I wanted to put a Bluetooth device in it, and I bought one of these things on AliExpress. So this is a little Bluetooth module. You can see Bluetooth modules under there, the antenna, there's the antenna, and there's a little processor of some sort, and this is probably a regulator. So what I want to do is I want to mount this Bluetooth module in here somewhere. And my original plan was to put it in the back in the battery compartment, but I think I'm going to see if I can mount it up here. That would just be a lot more usable. And again, this boombox doesn't have any significant value of any sort. I'm going to wire it to the line in switch. Let me turn down the volume here. When you put it on line in, it comes in over here, but it also turns on the power, so I should be able to also wire the power to here. The line in may or may not be usable under that circumstances, but I don't really care because this has its own line in here, so these will just not be used. So the first thing to do will be to make sure that this will work at 9 volts, and I'll do that with a separate power supply. After that will be to take this apart and see if I can find a mounting place for this on the front. If not, it can go in the back, I suppose, but it would be nice to have it up here. I know a lot of people, when they put these things on, put it in the cassette bay, but I want to use the cassette bay. I fixed the cassette deck. That's part of the point. So we'll put this over here, and it would be possible, actually, when this is placed, to copy to cassettes off of Bluetooth, which would be kind of fun, or the little trans flash card. And yeah, that's the process. It's got two little pigtails. This one's power, and this one has, let's see if we can see it here together. It's got ground, right out, left out, FM antenna. We won't hook that up because it has a perfectly good FM radio in it, and mute, which we also don't need to bother hooking up. So we're only going to be interested in those. Maybe I'll hook up the FM antenna. We'll see what I feel like about that. So let's start with trying to get the power supply to work with this and see if it's happy at 9 volts. If it is, yay. And then we'll start to see if we can find a mounting spot for that in the boombox. This is a little buck converter. It's got 12 volts coming in. We've got 8.8 volts coming out. And on the back here, we can see minus and plus. So we will hook that up accordingly and see what we get. These wires are very small. We got some lights. And we appear to have it working. Let's turn down the voltage and see how low it goes. It's very likely this is running on 5 or even 3 volts inside and just using the regulator to drop it down. So yeah, so even at 4.8 volts it's running. So it's probably running at 3 volts. There we go, 3.7. So yeah, so add in the loss of a protection diode and the regulator, and it's probably running at 3 volts internally, which would make sense. And it's rated to run up to 12, which, given that this is probably designed for automotive use, probably means 14 volts. But we can, well, I've only got a 12 volt power supply on this, so this won't go much above 9 anyway. But or there's no question that it'll run at the 9 volts that the radio operates at. And given its wide tolerance, my guess is that there will be no problem with voltage spikes caused by the unregulated power supply. So, in principle, this should work. So the next step is going to be to open up this and find a place to mount this. And my aim, ideally, it would be right here. I don't quite remember how close the board runs. That's going to be the issue. We need about 1 inch of clearance at the back. It's not very big. The faceplate at the front is larger. We'll see. Okay, it can't go on this side because there's not enough clearance to clear the tuning system, which, if you see, sticks out there, you know, 1.5 centimeters from the edge here. That's not going to give me enough clearance for the speaker on the other side. On this side, however, you've just got to clear the volume control assembly, and that's under 1 centimeter. So I think that might work. The problem is that we have these pins which hold this whole assembly in place, right? So I'm not sure there's an obvious way to get this to work, but this side seems more likely than that side. But we'll see, because we've also got to, not only do we have to get the board in, but we've also got to clear the wires and everything through. So putting it around something that's moving seems like a bad idea. This seems a little bit more likely. And I guess we could sacrifice those pins and let that be a little loose, or allow this sitting here like that to essentially be the support. I don't know. I'll have to play with it some more. So I tried to mark a clearance line here on this assembly, and that's 1 centimeter out. And if you hold this up, even if you cross over it a little bit, it's still not going to work. So that leaves here, I don't think so. I think you're into the cassette assembly. I'll maybe have a look at that. Or I'll have to go back to the original idea of mounting this in the battery compartment and running the wires up inside. If I look at that, it does look like there's enough space under there. Let me find a flashlight. I'll have a look. There is a fair amount of space behind the cassette mechanism. There are some splines, but it doesn't look like there's anything. This mechanism is attached to these pillars here, right? So this pillar here, that pillar there support the cassette mechanism, and it's entirely empty space behind it. So I've had the mechanism out before when I changed the belts. If I remember right, the screws lift the whole thing out. That would then give me access behind, and perhaps I could Dremel a hole right here. That would then be really easy because all the band switches and whatnot are on the board right behind there. I mean, I'm not thrilled by covering up the model number and stuff, but in many ways it would be the neatest installation. The other option would be to get rid of the line in, maybe move the FM stereo jack and put it up here, but then I'm going to be onto the board because these come out of the board. And so I think, it could be up here, but why not center it right in the... I haven't set up the stand and mic and stuff because it's kind of hard while moving this around, but I'll show you what I've done is I've mapped out what I think is the spot I can cut in, and that corresponds to putting this, so it's marking out sort of the space underneath there with a little bit of extra room. So what I've done is I've removed the cassette mechanism. As you can see, apart from a couple of rubber pads, which I think are designed to protect the top of the cassette mechanism from being bonked, it looks like it's okay. I pulled out the cassette mechanism itself right here, and you can see that there's really nothing on that side. Those pads, I think, are just operating as the return for the fast forward and rewind buttons. So I think it'll be okay. So I think the next step is going to be to try to remove this board. I've taken the switch off, and there's one screw here, there's a clip. This is the power from the power supply. So let's see if I can get that out, because that would make it much cleaner to work on this. I was able to unplug the radio with this flat cable here, and the volume and tone control section removes with an edge connector. So that's off. And then it's just going to be a question of a couple of screws and a couple of clips. And there we go. The main amplifier board is out, which contains the tape deck and whatnot. And that gives me a lot of space to work. I'm tempted to remove the tuner board, but we'll see. I'm not going to remove the power supply. We'll see if the tuner board looks easy to remove. I'm a little bit worried about getting goop all over these gears. Fortunately, there's a stop here and a stop on the tuner, so I'm hopeful that I'll be able to keep it, not have to reorganize it too much at the end. I've removed the tuner, so the only thing in place is the power supply board. And we can see there's the main board, the volume control and tone control board, the tuner, it's the tuner indicator, there's the tuner itself, a single chip, for a relatively small amount of supporting circuitry that attaches to the tuner itself, and that's it. It's all open up. So I'm going to get out the Dremel and see what I can do. Some Dremeling later, and I've cut a fairly ugly looking hole here. You can see where I rested the collet on the side, not good, but once you put this on, which does fit in place actually, hard to do with one hand, but it does snap into place. It will need to be glued because it's a little thick for the little snap catches at the side of the plastic to hold it, but it will stay in place. So that should work, assuming there's enough clearance, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. The next step is to figure out what's going on here in terms of our electrical connections. Here are the two plugs in, and if you flip it around to this other side, you can see the ground probably there, and the left and the right coming in here. So that's easy. The issue, however, is with this function switch, and this I believe is the correct position. Yes, that's the CD line in. So the CD line in, we should hopefully see one of these pins should show continuity to presumably positive. I assume it's switching the positive, but that may not be the case. Maybe switching the negative. So it'll be helpful to trace some of these tracks and figure out what's going on. But hopefully I can solder onto the back of one of those pins, and then I can use a ground somewhere for the rest of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get out the continuity meter and beep around and see if I can find that, and I'll solder on some little leads and see how that goes. So we've got this set up. I've got the hand tech out. It's going to need some cables, of which I anyway have all of them out with me. And This is overkill and not the easiest thing to use for this purpose, but it's what I got reasonably, well, it's the first thing I reached, let's be honest. Okay, so I'll put it on multimeter, put it on continuity. Okay, so what we're trying to do is we're trying to find continuity. So we want this switch in that position, and we want to find continuity on something to the power in, and the power in is here. Plus 9 volts is the top of this. So we should find, presumably, okay, so that looks like continuity between those pins. Let me find a marker. I'll just put, well, those, put a little mark on the first one and the second one. So those are those two there. And not very surprising, because we can trace this 1, 2, right, all the way along like this, all the way up to there. So we should have continuity between. Okay, let's move the switch back to, so it should be in cassette. Now my guess is we have no continuity now. Oh, we do. Oh yeah, you can see we have continuity there and there. Okay, so this switch, so what are we getting continuity to? What's it switching to? Well, that's me. Okay. So do we have continuity to anything else? How about if we put in radio? Does that provide power to the radio? So we do when it's over here. Let's try that again. Okay, so we should have continuity between here and there, and that one runs off along here. Well, that's to the chip, and then well, the radio is over here, so I don't know. Let me make sure that I'm looking at them correctly, and I will get back to you once I think I've figured it out. Okay, I think I've figured it out. So this goes to pin 1, which is power to the IC. So when it's in radio, there will be power from, again, pin 1, 2, right? So those are connected to here, and there's power to that. If we put it into radio, there's power to pin 1, so we've got plus on pin 1. And not on anything else. And when we put it on AV input, it's also got power on pin 1. So pin 1 is providing power to the amplifier. That's effectively the power switch. Well, I mean, we want to look at 1, right? Okay. What we really want to find, so this pin is on now. That one there. We want one that's got power, ideally, only when it's connected to the radio. But my guess is that since everything will backfeed, it doesn't really matter. These don't appear to be doing anything. So this is off when it's in tape, but if it's in radio or it's in, so I don't really have the option. So in other words, you could use that, you could use pin 1, but this one doesn't seem to be used by anything. So I think that's the one I'm going to use. Now, the question is, so that's going to be the positive. Let's see if I can unclip this. I unfortunately clipped it in, and it's a bit of a stiff one to remove. But so the goal here then is we'll solder one of these on here, and then we'll find a ground somewhere. It doesn't really matter what it is. This is all ground here, I believe, but we'll find something. So let's get this off. There we go. Okay, keeping in mind that the one that says minus is minus and the other one's plus. So we'll solder this to one of these pins here, and we'll solder the other thing to a convenient ground, and then work from there. Okay, so not the neatest soldering in the world, but we have what I think will be a workable power pin. Well, that really isn't very good, and ground coming from the outside, the ground of the switch, right? And we can run that right through. I think that's a tab, but we can run that right through somewhere there. So now the issue is going to be attaching the other connectors, and we want to see which ones we want. So we've got, if we line that up there, we can see the FM antenna is this wire here, which I don't think is easily going to reach the antenna, but we'll think about that possibility of putting that in. And then we've got on here, we've got I'll put that up correctly. We've got left out, audio ground, and right out. So I'm going to double check continuity on these to make sure that I understand what's going on. So my thinking is that should be the right. Do I have it? Okay. So that's the shield, and that should be the same for both of them. And then if we go into the center, oh, maybe I don't have it all the way in. Yeah, we've got that, and then this should be the left. Yep, so we know what that is. All right, and I'll just double check that I've got them the right way around. So if you flip them around that way, that's the correct way around. We'll do I will do this off camera, but I'm just going to solder these onto here. So we'll solder one of these onto here to be, yeah, I mean that's going to need to be tinned probably, but oh, it's pre-tinned. It goes. Okay, so that's going to be the ground for both of them. And then this should be the right, because I've got it upside down to the way it is, so this should be the right here. I will double check this afterwards, but so that should be the right audio in, and this should be the left audio in there. Yeah, that's pretty ugly. Okay, might put some fresh solder on those, but you get the idea. Right, so now we have the audio and the power, so it's really just a question of fitting it back together and hoping it all works. And hopefully my wires are long enough, which I'm not absolutely sure, but I think should be. So I am going to do that, as in put it all back together, and see where that goes. I'm not going to do that on camera. You saw the steps as I took it apart, and we'll take it from there. I will leave the soldering iron warm in case I need to touch up any of these. Yeah, we'll fix those up a bit before going any further. All right, so let me show you where I've gotten. I've got the main board in, the amplifier board is what I'm calling it. It's got the amplifier chip on it. I've got the equalizer board back on. I've got my two cables coming through. I'm still not sure what I'm going to do with the antenna cable, but we'll see once we see how the antenna lines up. I could put it onto the antenna pin on the on this board here, which is the, where does the antenna connect here? I'm not sure. Well, if I figure out how the antenna connects here, it might be, there's enough reach. If you see, there's enough reach, this board goes in there, there's enough reach that I could probably tack that on and get the FM antenna connected. Of course, the downside of that is potentially noise coming in from this circuit here. All right, so the next step is to get this little fascia mounted. I'm going to use a little bit of hot glue, I think, to hold it in place just behind these two little screw mounts. And then I will slide the board in place in that, and that's this one here that has everything on it, and we'll see if it works. Well, I've got the power plugged in. I don't have the radio board in yet. I don't have the speakers on. We'll do that in a moment. But I do have this in place temporarily. I haven't put any glue on it because I want to make sure it works first. So it's off. There should not be any power to this. If I put it in radio, there should be power to that. And if I put it on line in, there should be power to that. So we have power getting to the Bluetooth speakers. So next step is going to be to plug the speakers in and see if they work. So I've temporarily plugged in the speakers here. Here they are. We should have everything. I don't think the other boards are necessary. What we have is a lot of hum. Well, let's try routing these wires a little bit more carefully, and then we will see what we've got. The hum seems to be being caused by the LCD driver. Well, let's leave that there for now. Let's put it back together. It may be that having the radio and other things hooked up will improve matters. I'm not convinced of that, but we'll see. Yeah, it may be that I need to think about a different ground for it. In terms of the power supply, I'm not sure there's much I can do beyond that, but I could think about a different ground. Okay, well, let's get it mostly back together and see where we are. So just out of interest, I was able to get the antenna hooked up here, and that comes back to the radio, to the radio in here. Everything is back together. I've plugged the speakers in. We have the cassette board. One thing I've lost is the labeling on the cassette mechanism, but there's play. That's play. I don't have any hum on that. That's good. That's pause. That's stop. That's stop. Maybe I'll have to label those. If we put it on radio. The radio is working fine. And if we have it on Bluetooth, we've got some hum, but it does seem to be working. So next step will be to assemble it all, and let's try the Bluetooth system and see if we can make it work. So I've got this together, and it is working. I can use the Bluetooth. I haven't tried every other function, but Bluetooth works. The radio actually works. The FM radio built into this works. But the problem is that there's hum on it, and I'll just show it to you here with it. Okay, so we're in Bluetooth mode, and there's hum, and you can hear that there's interference from it doing, if there's interference going on in here. Now, when I put this in, I grounded the power to the most convenient spot, which was in fact the ground on this switch, the selector switch. And I'm thinking what I effectively did is use the audio ground as the power ground. I mean, it's the same ground in the radio, but it may not be in this. This may separate its power from its audio. And I think what we're hearing is hum from the power supply from the electronics, and this getting back into the electronics of the radio. Now that may be unavoidable, and we might need to think about filtering to solve that problem, but I suspect if I remove that ground over and put it to a power ground, that it might work. So I have put this all back together, except that, I always forget that this opens from the top, except I haven't put in the outside screws. So we can lift this off. We'll undo that. And then what I'll do is, I'll do this off camera, but I'll take out the cassette mechanism, and I'm probably going to have to disassemble it entirely, but I've had this radio apart so many times that doesn't faze me particularly. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to move the ground, and what I'm going to move the ground to is the other side of this power plug here. If I pulled it up, you can see it says 9 volts on it. Maybe you can see that right here, 9 volts. This is the power coming in from the power supply. And so what we're going to do is I'll just run an extension wire to the other side of this on the board and just solder it on there. I could probably figure out what the power ground is around the whole thing, but this seems easy and most likely to be effective. So let me take it apart, let me do that, and we'll put it back together and see if it works properly. So this is pretty straightforward. Here's where I've attached the existing ground, and I just need to move it down over here to pin the lower pin, ground 2, pin 2. No, I've lost it, over here. And I'll probably do that by extending it with a small bit of wire rather than try to stretch that so far. I've moved the ground as planned, and I tried to dust out of here a little bit, not very effectively, but that's an attempt anyway. I haven't put the cassette deck back in, but I have got the power hooked up and I've got the speakers hooked up. So let's turn it to Bluetooth. So I don't know if you heard that, but it went to Bluetooth. There was no hum. I think this is a working fix now. So what I'm going to do is put it back together and we'll have one final demonstration of that. I have installed the ground wire directly to the ground as opposed to going in around here. That appears to have solved the problem. I'll just show you the functions of this box. First, if you hit play, taste tape. Auto reverse is working eventually. Oh, we might be on a blank spot of the tape there. Anyway, eject. The only thing that I've done is cover up the tape indications, but that's fine. I got tape. We can put it on radio.
Getting audited? Ooh, you should probably deal with that. And grab a 23-ounce Canadian quarter.
That's functioning fine, as it always did. If we put in AM, that's not a great AM radio, but
I'm crazy about that.
it's fine for local, and there doesn't seem to be any real issue. Now, if we put it on Bluetooth, that means this is active. And I'll just power it off and on. It'll talk to you. Okay, we're now in Bluetooth mode. I put a battery in the little remote control, which does have a few things like equalizer, and I guess this will let you jump tracks with a compact flash card. But realistically, this is just going to be used as a dumb Bluetooth speaker here. I haven't quite figured out how to force it to into pair mode, but you can forget it on your device and then, you know, connect with the next one. That seems to be how a lot of inexpensive Bluetooth stuff works. So we can put on some classical music. X space works. You can play around with the equalizer. So, yeah, I think this has been a pretty successful project. What I've done is I've converted a rather standard 90s boombox into a Bluetooth radio, but we haven't lost any functionality. This line in probably shouldn't be used, but this line in is right there, and that's probably more convenient. At the back here in the previous videos, which I'll link down below, I replaced the battery with this little power board and a flat pack lithium battery. This board has worked quite well, and this will charge when it's plugged into the mains. So when it's plugged into the wall, it will charge those. It will charge that battery. It seems to last quite a long time, and so far, so good. So that, I think, wraps up this project for today. Thanks for watching. I think adding one of these little devices to an old boombox is a kind of fun project if you're into that sort of stuff. This isn't perfect. You can see where I chewed it up a bit, but someone with a little bit more skill with a Dremel could have done it perfectly and probably would have pushed this up just a little bit farther, so you would have saved at least, well, you either had to save this or you had to save that in terms of the printing on the top here, but that's fine. And you could put this on the back if you preferred, or even in the battery compartment. But up here, it's nice. It feels surprisingly integrated, and the cassette deck. Once you remember that's play, then everything else falls in line, and it would be easy enough to print a set of labels to put underneath. So thanks for watching. I hope this project is useful for someone. Maybe somebody else will feel like doing it. I'm sure there are better Bluetooth solutions than this. I did look at a number of things, but this was cheap and operated at the voltage level that I had available in this radio, which was the primary concern. I didn't want to have to deal with the 3-volt power supply. Anyway, the only major issue that came up here was the question of grounding, and like a doofus, I grounded originally to the audio ground, which obviously wasn't going to work in retrospect. Once I moved the ground to the power input to the main board, it's silent. No problems at all. All right, hope you've enjoyed it. Have a good evening.